It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Hi everyone, I'm Sam Lesante. Thanks for joining us. Folks, he wrote the book Fast Lane to Heaven. For those of you who are familiar with Ned Dougherty, this is an interesting book. He launched this book in March of 2001. And in this book, he shares his experience of having a near-death experience. And also the visions he received are in this book. Ned, once again, the book was launched in March of 2001, and you had a near-death experience, correct?
Well, actually, Sam, I had two near-death experiences. The first was on July 2nd, 1984, and the second was on November 30th, 1984.
So during the first near-death experiences, when you had the visions that are in this book, okay? And on previous shows, we discussed the visions in the book. In fact, if you get the book, folks, and if you get the book, you could go to endtimesdaily.com. We'll talk about that website in a second. But you can get this book, and you'll find on page 252, was it, where the visions are? Your predictions are...
Well, that chapter is, it's called The Future, where many of the events that took place in the last 10 years were itemized and foreseen in that chapter. Mm-hmm. Page 252 is the vision of a terrorist attack on New York and Washington, D.C. And
that was, and remember, this was in March when you kicked the book off. It was September.
The book was out in bookstores 6 months before September 11th.
Now, from this, a lot of things happened, okay? This wasn't only the first near-death experience, you had a second one. And when you had these near-death experiences, you were getting certain messages, okay? Let's talk about, first of all, your website, which is endtimesdaily.com. What can people see on that website now?
Well, Sam, I decided to launch this site, endtimesdaily.com, which will officially launch on May 1st of this year, 2011, although it's already online. It's still under construction. But it's a 24/7 news site, which will contain national and global news, health and wellness news, spiritual news. And the focus is on, frankly, the end times. What the news that we're seeing in current times means in terms of where we are headed as a people and in the United States as a nation. One of the areas of the End Times Daily, and I'm very excited about, is the messages area, where I have all of the messages that I've received on a monthly basis dating back to August 1st of 2005. I also have a section where other people like me who've been receiving interior locutions have their messages, and we have a complete index. People, for example, can search under the term New World Order, and it will pull up all of the messages that contain messages about the New World Order, for example.
You know, the interesting thing here is that when you had, as far as legitimacy of the book, I mean, when if people read the book, which I've had, and then they see what has happened over the last 10 years, it's amazing how everything that, you have, the visions you were shown are in this book. And then you also indicate that you had your very first message, okay? And how did that first message from St. Michael occur?
Well, that was what I would call the first interior locution.
Now, for the sake of the audience, explain what an interior locution is.
An interior locution is when the receiver, say in this case Ned Dougherty, hears an interior voice dictating a message word for word. And in my case, when I started receiving the messages on a monthly basis on August 1st, 2005, I had my laptop computer set up and I was praying and meditating. I was actually working on something else, and in prayer and meditation, I felt this powerful sense of St. Michael the Archangel coming over me. And literally, like a court stenographer who hears in a courtroom, I was hearing interiorly the voice of St. Michael. And my fingers went to the keyboard and I typed, "I am Michael the Archangel," and the message began, and I kept typing what I'm hearing faster than I'm capable of typing. And when the message was over, there was the message from St. Michael.
How do you know it was St. Michael?
Well, you have a feeling or a presence or even an interior vision, but this was, in this reality, this was the first time in August 1st, 2005. Now, the reason I knew it was St. Michael then was because during my second near-death experience, which took place in Washington, D.C., at the Vietnam Memorial at night, on November 30th, 1984, it was St. Michael who came to me during that experience. I was shown, again, many visions of the future, of future events, like I was shown on July 2nd, 1984. Only during that experience, St. Michael gave me a message specifically to the people of the United States of America, and it was a warning. And it's a message, Sam, a quite long message I'd like to read during this show.
Sure. Before we read the message, okay, getting back to, many people, when I had you on the show the very first time, okay, I remember you showing me a manuscript in front of St. Gabriel's Church. And
well, that's about 11, 12 years ago,
yeah.
Sam.
And I figured fine. But then when the book was published, I said, well, give me the book when it's published. Read the book, and of course, that's history. I found it quite interesting. But the thing that many people think about is that why you, okay? Why you, okay, and not a priest or a bishop or a cardinal or the Pope? Why Ned Dougherty? And those are, some concerns.
Well, I grappled with that question myself, especially after the first experience in July 2nd, 1984. I was actually angry with God for interrupting my life. As you know, Sam, I had a great life as a nightclub owner, and all of a sudden that's changed. God interrupted my life.
And here again, just to review, prior to this near-death experience, you were really living off the high. I mean, you were doing cocaine, you were doing champagne, brunches and dinners, and flying in private jets. You had
nightclubs in Palm Beach, Florida, and the Hamptons.
It wasn't, you didn't think twice of getting up in the morning and flying to California to have lunch.
God came along and ruined the party.
And he ruined the party, exactly. At that particular point in time, so when you had that near-death experience and then you began to get these visions. Now, you waited a while, okay, before you start writing a book. It just didn't happen, the 2 weeks or a month after this happened.
It was approximately 10 years later.
Now, once again, we did address this in one of the shows, but why did it take you 10 years before you decided to start writing the book and then the messages start coming?
Well, it was like the experience of St. Paul on the road to Damascus. God comes along and interrupts your life and strips you down, frankly, strips you down to your bare soul so you have a clear understanding of who you are and why you are here on earth and what your mission in life is. It takes a period of time for you to assume that mission. And frankly, it was a period where I had to grow mentally, physically, emotionally, psychologically, and mainly spiritually into the role that God planned for me. So it was kind of a second awakening approximately in 1994 when I realized that everything that I was shown was now time for me to begin writing the book. I was told during the first experience that I was going to write this book, Fast Lane to Heaven.
Folks, I'm talking to Ned Dougherty. He wrote the book, Fast Lane to Heaven. Folks, this is a fascinating book. I read it, and then after September 11, 2001, I had Ned on the show. And it's amazing how these visions over the last 10 years, they're all in this book. You can get this book by going to endtimesdaily.com. We come back, where he's talking about these messages. Now, I've been reading these messages since he's been putting them on, sending them to me on emails, and he has thousands of people who get them every month, and I find them very fascinating. We'll read a couple of them when we come back, plus talk a little bit more about his website. Why did he decide to put the website up, and what are we trying to accomplish by this website? Be back after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. You can watch any of our programs 24/7, ssptv.com. Folks, over 1 million hits so far on our website. That's ssptv.com. Now, there's many other shows, folks, that are on the website that we produce here in Hazleton at Samson Productions, plus our production area. For those of you who are interested in knowing what kind of work we do, well, just go to our production area and you'll be pleasantly surprised. SSPTV.com. If you'd like to get in touch with me, my email is sam@ssptv.com. My guest, Ned Dougherty, the author of the book Fast Lane to Heaven. He launched this in 2001 in March, and now he's launching a new website called endtimesdaily.com May 1st. Now, during the first part of the show, we talked about your interior locutions, okay, and messages. Now, some of those messages you say come to you, and then you begin to... Now, why don't you read one of the messages that you received, and then I want to ask you some questions about it.
Well, the first message, Sam, I actually received, again, during the second near-death experience on November 30th, 1984. And this was when I was, by the way, clinically dead, where I collapsed in front of the Vietnam Memorial. It was at night. And I found myself in the other world, if you will, in a spiritual world, very powerful presence of St. Michael the Archangel, and I started seeing visions of future events that were going to happen while I received this message. So I will read it now word for word. It was addressed to the people of the United States of America. Your forefathers created one nation under God, with liberty and justice for all. These were men of high ideals, spiritually guided and inspired to create a nation and a civilization to be admired and respected, to set an example for the rest of the world. In exercising their free will under God's guidance and direction, they created a constitution and a Bill of Rights for every man, woman, and child to live in freedom in the pursuit of happiness. Yet these high-minded and spiritual men were soon replaced by others who, in the exercise of their free will, chose to put their egos before God and to joust with God's plan. You became a nation of spoilers, man against man, brother against brother, government against citizens. And the chosen nation became a warrior with and against other nations. You have become a nation of criminals and murderers. You murder in wars. You murder the innocent. You murder your children. Your leaders create laws to justify the murders, to attempt to make wrongs right, to rewrite morals and ethics to support your own earthbound greeds and desires. You have become a nation further and further away from the Spirit and the influence of God. You have created sciences and philosophies to support activities that only recognize earthbound realities, that not only refuse to recognize the spiritual nature of man himself, but refuse to recognize even the existence of God. You have taken God and His works of prayer and meditation out of your governments, out of your institutions, out of your schools. You have done everything you can to deny His existence, and you find yourself in a world filled with wars, hatred, starvation, and death, and you do not understand why the rest of the world does not follow your shining example. You are a nation at war with itself, filled with hatred, prejudice, crime, drugs, and murder. Yet when the few of you who do look to God ask Him why all these things are allowed to happen, you do not hear His answer. You are members of the human race, universally created by God and given free will individually by divine right, and you would not wish to have it any other way. Yet every little act of free will that man has exercised from the beginning of time that was not in accordance with God's plan multiplied in its impact and its negativity on the future of man. Every simple act of aggression multiplied into acts of world war. Every simple act of greed multiplied into worldwide human suffering and starvation. Every act of destruction of God's environment on earth multiplied into destructive forces of nature, earthquakes, floods, pestilence, nuclear destruction, and nuclear waste. Every act of violence escalated into acts of murder and the extermination of ethnic people for their appearances and beliefs. Yet God created a nation of high ideals for you to survive other empires and civilizations that crumbled into oblivion, for their leaders placed themselves as men above God, and now those empires and civilizations are but piles of dust or buried under the waters. You sit on the edge of the new millennium, poised for the future of mankind, and you are headed, like all great civilizations of the past, to be reduced to piles of dust, to be covered over by the waters. Yet, God comes to you again, to appeal to you as a people, to appeal to you as a nation, to appeal to your leaders. His army of angels is visiting upon you with a life force of energy, a spiritual energy radiated by the Creator of all mankind. Many of you feel the vibrancy of His energy and His divine presence. He is communicating with you spiritually, telling you to raise yourselves to the level of spiritual transformation that is necessary for those of you who hear Him to spread His message and His energy, to recognize that He is coming. Guided by prayer and meditation, all men, women, and children may answer His call, but it must be soon. Time is running out. The angels are coming. Do you hear them? Are you listening? Are you listening?
Now, this was written, you got this message, what year was it?
This was on November 30th of 1984, again, when I was clinically dead, on the sidewalk
30,
in front
okay.
of the memorial.
So when
Right.
you hear that message, I'm sure many people are thinking of what happened since then in that message. But did you ever think, now remember, you had no spirituality, okay? When was the first near this, in 1984? Is that when you got your first one?
Well, the first was July 2nd, 1984, and just months later.
Okay,
Right.
so now keeping in mind here, we have to look at the nature of Ned Dougherty.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, you had no time for God. You weren't practicing your Catholic religion.
Well, I was a practicing Catholic for, let's say, the first 18, 19 years of my life.
Yeah.
16 years of Catholic education.
But then after that,
No.
That was it.
I
I
was
mean-
probably agnostic, if not even atheist.
Okay,
Sam,
so-
I was having too good a time partying to even think about God.
all right. So now the point is, just a few months after that, you get this message. You would have never, in a million years, would ever thought that you would have gotten a message like this, of all this information. So I'm trying to look at the logic here, okay, for people who sometimes, are very skeptical and wondering, But when you listen to that message, and you see where we are today. Now, that was only one of many messages, okay? Now, and I get your messages every month, okay? The people who would like to see a number of those messages, okay? When we come back, folks, we'll let you know how you receive all of the messages he's received. Plus, are we preaching doom and gloom here? Is Ned Dougherty talking about doom and gloom? I don't think so. However, we know what has happened so far, folks. We're paying the price for the abortions. We're paying for the price for what's happening with taking God out of everything we could possibly take God out of. And for those people who are fighting, they're getting pushed aside by the liberal media. We'll talk about that right after we come after a break. Thanks for staying with us, folks. I'm Sam Lesante, once again, SSPTV.com. My guest, Ned Dougherty, the author of Fast Lane to Heaven, and he read the first message he got from St. Michael in 1984. And if you heard it, folks, I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist to see what's going on. Now, 2005, August the 1st, almost 20 years later, you received a second message, okay, and then every month thereafter. Well, read some of the excerpts of the second message after 20 years.
Well, I'd like to preface that by saying, Sam, the rest of the messages I received, being in this reality, not in a condition of being dead or near death. I was actually here in Hazleton, Pennsylvania, and I came up here to work on some other writing that I was doing, and I was sitting in prayer and meditation the morning of August 1st, 2005, right up here in Elm Street where I grew up. And I recognized again the very powerful presence of St. Michael coming over me like he did on November 30th, 1984 in Washington, D.C. And again, my fingers literally went to the keyboard and I typed, "I am Michael, the Archangel," and the message began. Again, it's a quite comprehensive message. Again, it's a warning to the people of the United States of America. I'd like to read just a portion of that message right now because it continues on from the theme of the first message. You are given the opportunity at this point in history to make a choice, to clearly be on the side of God or to continue on a path that is against His divine will. As a people, the choice is yours to make. Do not allow the power brokers and politicians to make these decisions for you when you realize that your decisions are wrong. That their decisions are wrong. Your first allegiance is to your God, while their allegiance is to materialism and greed. You must rise up as a nation and protest the policies that do not recognize the sanctity of life. You must return to God and His commandments to your government, to your institutions and your schools. You cannot allow the present conditions to continue.
You know, Ned, it fascinates me. You know, there's no question, that I am definitely 100% pro-life. Because I've seen throughout the years what abortions have done and destroyed people's lives, their families, and yet we still have our current president who is pro-choice. His wife is pro-choice. I'm not becoming political here, but I'm just saying. And it's sad because really, the sanctity of life is the most important thing. We fight to keep people alive, okay, as long as we can. We have the latest technology to keep people alive, whether there's 70, 80, 90, or 100. But yet we don't think twice of aborting children and pulling their brains out and pulling their arms out. And I know Planned Parenthood don't like to hear this stuff, okay, or people who are pro-choice don't like to hear this. But we are allowing this to happen, and we're paying the price. Now, your End Times Daily does not preach doom and gloom, okay? We got about 2 minutes left. Explain to the viewers that what your website is all about, so people know that there's some hope here at the end of the tunnel here.
Well, first of all, Sam, I not only provide links to current news, national global events, I provide an insight into what is behind the deception of the news and the way it's being propagandized.
I want to interrupt you before we leave. Your video here, the Dome of Deception.
The Dome of Deception.
I think is fantastic. Again, these other videos, folks, you want to find out the videos he has, you go to his website, endtimesdaily.com, and this Dome of Deception is fantastic. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Ned, but I want to get this in before we ended the show. Well,
actually, the DVD, The Dome of Deception, talks about how we're being deceived by the major media networks.
Big time.
Big
time.
So,
big time.
So the website End Times Daily is to try to clear the air and present the truth as frankly it's seen through my eyes, if you will, but my eyes based on the inspiration that I get from the messages. You know, Sam, on a monthly basis, the messages that have come to me, particularly from St. Michael, are very strong. He doesn't mince words.
No.
But I also get messages from Jesus, sometimes as the Redeemer, sometimes as Jesus of Nazareth, and sometimes from Our Lady. Often as she comes to me as Our Lady of Light, sometimes as the Queen of the Universe. And all those messages are very hopeful, they're very beautiful. Yes, they contain warnings about events that may happen, but part of that is through the power of prayer, we the people can change the tide of the terrible things that are happening around the world.
Well, let me just tell you that where I see some light at the end of the tunnel here, what's happening is, okay, and I'm all for free press. That's what I'm in, okay? But when you look through over the years, if you look at all of the major media that have been so pro-choice, whatever is promoting immorality and taking God out of everything and justifying it. When you look at the New York Times, their circulation's decreasing. You look at any major liberal newspaper, they're decreasing. You look at any television station, broadcast station that have been preaching that and been pro-liberal, their viewership's going down the tubes. When you look at the evening news that people begin to, that had so much faith in, they're beginning to diminish, okay, because people are beginning to realize that they are being slanted. And you could see, Ned, when you're watching major evening news, how they'll tell you something, but they'll come back and slant it the way that they want you to believe it. Folks, it's endtimesdaily.com. It's fascinating. I welcome your comments, folks. I really do. Sam at ssptv.com. I really welcome your comments. Ned, good luck with your website. I wish you the best. We'll see you next time.